Alrighty then, let's make myself a little bit brighter. So I'm a little tired today, so I might not be as chatty as I am sometimes, but we'll see how it goes. The goal today is similar to what it was a couple of days, maybe weeks ago. Was it 2 weeks already? So the goal is to take this visual... Wait, let me start recording. Cam twist, there we go. I should be visible. Start recording, and this is gonna kind of slow down my computer, so we'll see how it goes, but I'm hoping for the best. So our goal today is to refactor this data visualization that we built as part of the big example project in React for data visualization and turn it into the new hotness in the React land, which is hooks. We're going to be focusing on refactoring the data visualization parts into hooks, and we're not going to worry about the data management parts and the whole state management stuff. We're just focusing on the data visualization. I'm going to explain how hooks work and the way to think about them mostly in the text, I think. Today, with this video, we're just going to focus on how to refactor what you've built so that you can see how it might work with hooks, and it's also gives you, you know, it gives you kind of an idea of how you might use the knowledge you've gained through this entire course and turn it into hooks with the new stuff. But because hooks are still new, I didn't want to rewrite the entire course with hooks, because one, that would take too long, and two, there's still a lot of code out there that's not using hooks yet. So let us begin. I have the project started. I'm going to start with opening the data handling file, and we're going to change that one so that we're using the shortened data set, which will help us develop stuff faster. So that comes here. We do minus shortened. Now when this refreshes, it should show less data. There we go. It shows just the first 2 years, not even the full 2 years, but this is going to make it faster for us to develop because we're not loading and reloading the entire data set every time. So we can start the refactoring with the median. Actually, let's make a new branch as well. Git checkout -b hooks refactor, and git commit -a -mem. We say we went back to shortened data set. So now we're gonna start with the median household line, because that is the simplest component we've got, which will make it quickest to refactor. So if we another thing we have to do is go into package JSON and update our React to 16.8 and run yarn install. So that's going to give us actual support for hooks. Alright, so when that installs, our project is ready to actually work with hooks, and we can go into the median line and refactor that one first. Then we're going to go into the county map and then the histogram, and that's going to be most of our refactoring. You'll see that it's not that hard. Most of the principles we followed already through the course are very easy. They map well onto hooks is what I'm gonna say. I wouldn't say easy, but you'll see. Git commit -n enable hooks. Okay, so we go to the median line, React. Now the nice part of the median line is that we already kind of went easy on ourselves and did all of the calculations for the D3 scales and stuff in the actual render function, which is very similar to how hooks behave. So if we use memo here, use memo is a hook that memoizes whatever you're putting in. So it's like, think of it as putting something into local state and only changing it when certain parameters change. That's what use memo does. It takes a function that returns a result, and we're going to use that to memoize our y scale, so we're not recalculating it on every render. So we can say use instead of const y scale equals d3 scale linear, we can say use memo, and memo then takes a function. How does use memo work? I keep forgetting this part. So hooks API reference, use memo, like there. Yes, so it computes the value and returns the result. Perfect. So use memo takes a function, and our function is going to return the linear scale, and we tell it to only, we're gonna tell it to only run that code when certain parameters, certain props change. So how do we do that? We need to close that one there. We are depending on the data, but let's say just the data length changing, because data is an object, which means the object itself is very rarely going to change, or likely never, but the data length is a good way to kind of guess that our data has changed. So we're going to depend on data length. We're going to depend on the value function that we get into our median line, the height changing, the vertical position changing, and what else are we using? We're also using bottom margin. Great. So there we go, like that. And this is weird. It prettier added a bunch of stuff. So use memo is now going to take the result of our object is not a function. That's what? Okay, we're gonna check what y-scale actually returns, but it's supposed to use memo is supposed to return the result of our function and only run that calculation function based on these, what are they? Based on the parameter, based on the props we're using in the function. When those change, use memo reruns the function that generates the value that's being stored. So let's add a console log for y-scale over here and see what's happening. Why is y-scale not memoizing correct? What? So console here, object is not a function. Which object is not a function? Let's try refreshing that again. Median line on line 14. Why is use memo not a function? With a referentially stable function, also give it as the input in the second argument. What? Okay, let's see if I actually updated my my React. What if we say console log of use memo? Is that correct? So this is rerunning and we get use memo is undefined. So that's what's wrong. I need to restart the server. Well, it's going to take a while to recompile everything, but the lesson here is that when you update libraries, you have to restart your local host because otherwise it doesn't pick up on the new libraries. And I think that's what went wrong. There we go. Cool. So we now have the actual use memo in use, and it's recalculating our y-scale only when properties change. We can do the same with the line generator and say use memo of d3 line. So plot returns d3 line, and we only want to recalculate this when the width changes. because as you can see here, it's only depending on the width. And maybe, okay, prettier is putting everything in the same line, which is a little bit confusing. The median value is fine. We don't need to worry about memoizing that one. And we are done with, yeah, the median value, I mean. So we have that calculated. You can see that it's going to move around as it's supposed to, which means that the memoization is working and our component is optimized, so it only recalculates D3 objects on when particular props change. So we're going to commit that, git commit -a -m, and we say refactor median line to hooks. Great. Now all of this is potentially, well, you'll see in other components, this all of this logic might get a little bit messy, so we're going to extract it out. But for the median line, I think this is good enough. The next one we said we're gonna refactor is the county map. So we go to county map.js, change to JavaScript, or I mean to React, and now here we have a lot more stuff going on, right? So we're going to first move this into use memo calls, then we're going to extract it into custom hooks to clean up our component. So, or potentially we can start with, yeah, let's start with refactoring it in place, and then we're going to move it around. So we have export default county map, and instead of the render function in our class, we're going to, the easiest way is to comment out the entire class up to here, where it's called the render method. No, that one, okay. And now our render method is going to become the function called county map that takes props and then does stuff with them. So we have US topper JSON values and zoom that comes from props. Now our state is going to, so here we have geopath and quantize, which are the path generator for individual segments of the map, and quantize is the quantile. It's basically, it's a scale that buckets our data set, so that we use that to generate different colors for different counties depending on what the data says. We're going to move those into use memo hooks, and basically whatever is here in our constructor is going to move into there, and our get derived state from props, all of that is going to move into use memo calls. So let's do it. Let's do that. We say const geopath, or let's see, we started with the projection. That was the first thing we needed. So we can say const projection equals use memo, and again we have a function that returns our GeoAlbers scale function like that, and we recalculate that never. So we calculate it once and then we never have to recalculate it again, because you know, map projections don't really change depending on data. Although we are going to change it when we change the zoom level. So we'll talk about that next. Now we have the geopath. For starters, that, let's see, the geopath is const geopath equals use memo, and then we have a function that returns all of our geopath, and again for starters it's never going to recalculate. And our quantize scale is also stable in the beginning, so we say const quantize equals use memo, where we return the quantize scale and we say that the scale never changes. What did I get wrong? Okay, so we now have that, and Prettier isn't breaking it up into multiple lines, which is kind of annoying. We need to remove one of those. There we go, and import use memo up here. Cool. So now use memo. Now everything should be compiling and running, but it's not going to actually work. It's because we're using a bunch of defaults. We're not feeding data properly into our map yet, and the result is that the map is incorrectly zoomed and positioned in the wrong place on the screen. So we can fix that by moving code from our getDerivedStateFromProps function from the earlier approach into what we're doing here. So we can see here that the projection translates and scales depending on width and height. So we can move that down here, and we can say translate stays the same with, we take the width and the height props and we add them to our props list, width and height, and here we say width times blah. We need to remove this semicolon, and we say that our projection recalculates based on width and height changing. So now we have a D3 projection that recalculates every time that we change the width and height of our county map. So when those props change, this function runs, returns a new projection generator, and we can then use it in the geopath. And that means, because the actually, so no, I think it's best to change this. So I think potentially this might just work regardless of recalculating the geopath, because it holds a reference to the projection, and that reference might always be the same. But it's better to make sure, or to be explicit and say that because our projection depends on width and height, that means our geopath also depends on width and height. So when width and height change, we also recalculate geopath. Let's see if geopath also needs any other stuff. So here we have the projection scale here, then so then here we can see that when the zoom level changes, I'm going to assume that US topo.json is never changing. We load it once and then it just works. So if the county we're zooming on changes, we need to update both our projection and I think our no, just the projection. So yes, so I'm gonna copy all of this stuff and go down here to our projection again. We're going to change this to a method that says let projection equals D3 stuff, like that, and then we return projection. So we now have a function that calculates the projection and then returns it. And if the zoom level is defined, and there's also, we just assume that US topo.json is there. We're not going to assume that it ever changes. So we can take all of that, and that's going to recalculate what's it called? It recalculates the central point of the projection to move it around. So we have US topo.json features, takes stuff. We need to add US state names to our list of props. So US state names, and then zoom that finds the ID of the county or the state that we're focusing on. And here we now have a problem. So with props width and height, so translate projection translate, we now have a geopath here that we're using to calculate the central positioning of our thing, but we don't have that at the time when this runs, because it's in the beginning of the function. Geopath isn't defined yet, which is going to be a problem, but zooming up and down is hard. So this is also now dependent on the zoom, which means the geopath is dependent on the zoom. Cool. So now let's see, how can we fix this part? if we here click on CA, it should zoom into California, but it says that geopath is not defined for to calculate the central, like the central point of the California state. So how can we fix that in this situation? Okay, I know actually how we can fix that. We're going to move all of this into the same function. So here we're going to take this out, and we're going to say that const geopath and projection equal use d3 map, what should we call it? Use d3 map stuff. Yeah, and to that one we're going to pass in, we say we needed width, height, zoom, and US topo JSON, and we also need US state names. And we're now going to define a custom hook, which is going to calculate both the geopath and the projection and return both of them back. And so we're gonna have const use d3 map stuff, which, as we said, takes width, height, zoom, US topo JSON, and US state name. Takes all of those, and then seems the same as before, except so it's going to return the geopath and the projection, except we're going to move the geopath up, and we're going to say that it's not going to need its own use memo. So const geopath equals that, takes the projection and then never recalculates, and the projection recalculates when width, height, or zoom change. US state names is not defined. State names. So the projection, okay, we're gonna take that. So we're defining just the geopath, and then here down here we're saying geopath dot projection is projection. This changes the internal state of the geopath d3 object to use the new projection. But just to make sure that works, we also have to assign it here. So geopath.projection is the projection, and that way it's going to recalculate here in to have our centroid. Let's see if that works. US state name is not defined. Where is that? Line 97. 97 US state names. Okay, and do we actually need the projection anywhere? So as you can see, it's now remapping, and that works great. But it seems that we're not actually using the projection anywhere in our rendering. We're only using it to define the geopath. So we can say our use d3 map stuff is going to be renamed to use geopath, and that's going to depend on width, height, zoom, US topo JSON, and US state names. It's going to, where is it? It's going to return the geopath like that, and we're going to rename it use geopath, and the geopath, the whole thing is going to use memo, and that's going to work best. So we now have use memo directly returns the geopath based on our stuff. So we say let geopath equals d3.geopath, right? Path. So we create a new geopath. We then create a projection. If the zoom level is if the zoom state is defined, we we do the things. So if the zoom state is defined, we do everything that we need to do to zoom the geopath. Here we can move that to a new function so it's easier to read, and then we say geopath.projection is the new projection, and we return the new geopath. And now this should work as well. Let's see. So this is the picture, and it zooms into California. If we take the zoom level away, it shows the entire map. Awesome. So that means the new hook works, and we have a custom used geopath hook that depends on width, height, zoom, US topo JSON, and US state names. We can make this a little cleaner by saying projection equals zoom projection, and we're going to pass in a bunch of stuff. So we're going to make a function here, function zoom projection, and let's see, what does that need? It returns the projection. It's going to need zoom US topo JSON. It's going to need the width and the height. Okay, let's try them. Width, height, zoom, US topo JSON, and it's also going to need the geopath, right? Geopath. And is there anything else? The projection as well. So we're passing the projection into zoom projection that changes it and returns the changed value. It also needs US state names, which is kind of annoying, but you know, actually we can make that a little easier to use. So let's see, if the zoom is defined and US topo JSON is defined, then we change the projection, which means we only pass it the ID, and what else? Okay, it's going to need only slightly less stuff. So ID and width and height and US topo JSON, like that. So the ID is going to be this stuff. Come on. So I'm now just trying to clean up the function so it doesn't take as much as many inputs. So it takes the ID with height US topo JSON, which means here we can remove this part. We're not gonna need like that, projection, geopath, and we don't need to pass in US state names, but instead we do have to pass in the ID. So I guess we didn't really save that much, but I think it makes the code a little cleaner, or a little easier to understand at least. Cool. And now we have that and it's working. So git status county map. Our county map is now kind of still a pretty messy component. Let's see, what can we change here? Const US topo JSON, US state mesh. So we can move all of this stuff to a different hook as well. So git status, git commit -a-m. Refactor county map objects to blah, not blah, to hooks. And then another thing we can do is extract all of this into a custom hook to clean up our rendering function even more. Let's see. So we take, where are we? So US topo JSON, counties, so we need the counties and we need the states map, the US states mesh. So here we can say const counties and US states mesh equals use, what should we call it? Use topo.json. Yeah, use topo.json, that works. And we pass in US topo.json. And that means we can take all of this stuff out. So that's kind of the nice thing about custom hooks, is you can use them to wrap pretty much any functionality and create a custom hook out of it, whether it in turn is using hooks or not. It just makes your code much cleaner, I think. So here we say function use topo.json, which takes the topo.json data, and it's going to return US states mesh and the counties. And the best part is that we can potentially make it so that we can add a use memo to this stuff. Because US topo.json, we know that once we have the data, it never changes, which means we can say that this is a use memo that returns topo.json stuff and never changes, and this is also a use memo that returns topo.json stuff and never changes. Cool. Because generally speaking, the geographical information about the United States is never going to change, at least not within the confines of our data visualization. So we can use the use memo hook to make sure we only do these somewhat expensive calculations once, or if React decides for whatever reason to rerun it again, we should always be ready to do that. But it means that this can be a little, it's a performance optimization, really. So the same we can do here for county value map. We can wrap this in use memo and say, so county value takes from pairs, and that depends on values. No. Why isn't, okay, so it wasn't happy for just a second there. So if I click that, we should get the re-rendered map. Let's see if I click engineer. Yep. So you can see that it's working. It doesn't have a lot of data right now, but the map itself seems to be working fine. Now the cool thing is that we can go into the county.js component. So let's commit that. Git commit -a-m, fully refactor county map to hooks. Now the cool thing is that our county component no longer needs this should component update, because the top level components are already fast enough and they're not suffering from any of these issues. So let's see if I click so that should work. Yep. Awesome. So whatever we were solving before with a should component update is no longer necessary, because use memo and hooks in general are taking care of that for us. So we can also, because we no longer need that, we can refactor this to be a functional component. So we take the props and change it like this. There we go. And it should still render. Let's see if it does. Wonderful. So county is now also a simple functional component. Git status, git commit -a-m, refactor county to a functional component. Interesting, nobody's joining the chat room today. Cool. I guess that means we also don't need to import component anymore from React. So the next step we said is tackling the histogram. We're gonna start with the axis component and then move on to the histogram itself. because for the access component I've pre-built a hook that we can use called useD3, which is going to give us black box rendering without any of the problems. So, you'll see. So here we used a higher order component that we built ourselves called D3 Black Box. I went and open sourced a solution for this, so you no longer have to build your own hook, but it also comes with a useD3 hook, React hook. So I'm going to say yarn add D3 Black Box, and you'll see how we can do this with hooks. Let me check something. So I'm curious if anyone is watching this live and the chat room isn't working, which has happened in the past. And just to be safe, I'm going to stop recording so it saves and then start a new recording, because last time I did this, Camtasia crashed and everything died. Okay, so we do have 3 people watching. Why is stop recording not stopping? Damn it. I would like to continue waiting, and please save my recording. Great. So Camtasia lost my recording yet again. I'm gonna start a new one and let's see if it's saved. System preference, no, not system preferences. I need the Finder. So excuse me while I figure out what happened with my recording real quick. So applications, documents, it should be in movies. Where are movies? Go. How do I not have movies? Go to folder, movies, and here we have Camtasia 2018 temporary recordings from 17/2. Okay, so it did seem to record. I'm going to bravely press on and figure out what's going on later. Why am I not moving here? Why is this not working? Am I stuck here as well? Okay, I am stuck. So, god damn it. People, you gotta tell me these things. Don't just drop off. Tell me that camera isn't working. It's really beneficial, because now I just spent an hour recording without my face moving. Okay, so let's start that recording again. Cool. Let's see. Where was I? Right, so we installed D3 Black Box with the useD3 hook, and I'm going to... What is my phone doing? And yeah, let's see what happens next. So useD3 is going to replace this whole thing with a useD3 hook. So we're going to say import useD3 from D3 Black Box, like that, and we're going to say that we now have a function called access that accepts the props of scale and data, and we say use, how does it work? So use const ref equals useD3, and that takes our entire rendering function here. So that's our D3 rendering function, like that. So ref d3 function, use d3 function, constant axis, takes the scale, and ticks are depending on data length, and it selects let me check it out. I forgot how it works. So d3 black box, use d3 down here. Okay, so it gets the anchor, and we use that anchor to do stuff here. Anchor current, and we go back to that, and we render a grouping element that is transformed to the correct coordinates, so $x, $y, and has a ref of our ref, like that. And we have to import React as well. So import React from React, and X and Y are part of our access props. So we can remove the old implementation, and let's see if it works. The axis does not work. What did I get wrong? Let's see. What did I get wrong? So if we go to React and we search for axis, we see that the axis is there. It's positioned at x80 and y. It's transformed to be in the correct location, but then the use d3 stuff isn't working. What if we just say select anchor? Did I change that? Now it works. Alright, so we don't have to do anchor.current. We can use the anchor directly, and the idea is that this use d3 hook is doing everything that our d3 black box higher order component was doing before, except it does it with a useRef hook and a couple of other things. It takes a function that is our d3 renderer, passes in the anchor component. We can then do all of our d3 stuff, and the overall axis component returns a grouping element that acts as the anchor for our use d3 renderer. So we git status, git commit -a -m, refactor axis to use d3, and git push origin hooks refactor. Awesome. So the only one left is the histogram component, and then we're going to be done with this refactoring. We go to the histogram component, and this is going to follow pretty much the same process as the county map did. We're going to turn everything into just our render function. It might make sense to keep the make bar helper function, so we're going to do that. And we're going to move the histogram with scale, y scale into use memo calls, and then potentially extract them into a custom hook that works just for this particular function. And the whole reason, and don't be afraid of using custom hooks that aren't reusable, that are just for one thing, because they're really great for cleaning up your functions and your render and your components, so that you keep rendering in your components and extract the logic and the business stuff with hooks. So use memo from React, and we say class histogram still extends React component, and that's just so that we can use the make bar function, although the make bar function can be its own function. So we're gonna do it this way. Blah. Function histogram, which takes some props and returns all of this stuff. It takes, let's see, x, y, data, and axis margin at the very least. So those are our props. We can make bar can become its own function. So we say const make bar equals this functional component, which is going to take the bar and the y scale and a width scale, and also apparently is going to need data. So it's going to need access to all of the data, to the current bar that it's rendering, the y scale and the width scale. So data.length, and it looks like it is also going to need the axis margin. So we're gonna pass that in as well. Great, so we have that. We can comment out the old class histogram implementation so that we get stuff compiling. We are going to comment that out for now. So bars are histogram of data. That's going to be a great use memo kind of thing. So let's see, use memo histogram of data. And yeah, so use memo, this is for calculating all of the data. It's going to depend on data length changing. Then the next one we need, okay, so bars map of make bar, we can change that. So we call it make bar, and we said it requires bar, y scale, width scale. We can just copy this stuff. So we copy all of this down here. So we now go through all of through each bar. We call the make bar helper function, pass in the particular bar data from the histogram, the y scale, which we haven't defined, the width scale, which we also haven't defined, the data and the axis margin that both come from props. So the next step is to define all of this stuff. So we're going to say const histogram equals use memo of d3 histogram, which in the beginning depends on nothing and never recalculates. Then we have const hello bird, const width scale, which is use memo of d3 scale, what did we say it was, scale linear, which also doesn't depend on anything yet. And we have const y scale, which again uses use memo d3 dot, wow, these thumbnails are so big, d3 scale linear, which depends on nothing. Great. So we should now have a histogram that totally doesn't work, as you can see here, because we need to update our scales depending on the props. So we go into get derived state from props, and we see that our histogram defines thresholds based on the number of bins in our props and the value function that's passed in. So we can move that here, say dot thresholds, and we say bins and props come from our bins and value come from our props up here. And now the histogram memo depends on the bins and the value. So when the value function changes, or when the number of bins that we want changes, we're going to recalculate the histogram. And that should work in theory at least. So that's our histogram. Then we have the width scale, which gets a domain and a range. Let's see, so the width scale dot domain dot range, gotta take that out. So we're gonna need counts, then we have width, and we have axis margin. We haven't added width yet, so we now know that this depends on the width and the axis margin, and it's also going to depend on the histogram function changing, and I think that's gonna work, so we're just gonna try it. So we have d3 scale linear, we return that, and our const counts is equal to, what did we do up here? We calculated the histogram of our data, and then got the counts like that. So we can actually just copy this. So we go here, plop, and we get the bars data d.length. Okay, so we will see. So this now depends on, let's not make, maybe we can make it depend on a histogram, but it also needs to depend on data length. So that's that one. Now the last part is, I think, we'll see if it works, but the last part should be making the Y-scale stuff work. So we take the Y-scale, how did we define it here? Move that into here. So we now have use memo that returns a linear scale that is dependent on the bars. So again, we have the same bars calculation that we had before, which might make sense to move that up here, and then we don't need to keep recalculating the histogram. So we do it this way. So the bars recalculate on data length. We depend on the bars. And the data length, do we need that? No, we don't need that anymore because bars already depends on that. Hi, Burp. And now our Y scale, wow, I am very bad at scrolling today. So our Y scale gets the height, the vertical position, and the bottom margin, which means it needs to depend on all of those, height, Y, and bottom margin. Like that. And we need to add those to our props. So width and height, axis margin, and bottom margin. Now, in theory, this should render as the histogram, but we will see if it does or if there are errors. Haha, histogram showed up. Now, what can we do here? We have a lot of different things that we aren't necessarily using. Or rather, we have a lot of code here that we can extract out into a custom what did I say? Custom hook. So we're going to take all of this and we're going to change it so that we get bars, the Y scale, and the width scale from a use histogram component custom hook, and that custom hook is going to need almost everything from our props. So we take this and we say function use histogram is a custom hook that defines a bunch of stuff, and then it returns bins, histogram, and no, we don't need histogram. We need bars, Y scale, and width scale is what we said, right? Bars, Y scale, width scale. So bars, Y scale, width scale, like that. And now the nice thing about using TypeScripty or the new Create React App stuff that has kind of TypeScript support with VS Code is that we clearly see what all of the undefined values are. So we start adding them to our function arguments. So we know we need bins, we know we need value, we need the data. The next one is width and axis margin. Then we have height, Y, and bottom margin. Height here. So that's all of them. We then, because we know these are part of our props, we can copy paste the entire function arguments into here where we're calling the use histogram function or custom hook. And voila, everything works. We'll see that the histogram correctly re-renders. We can click on programmer and the histogram is going to re-render and everything's going to update in theory. Let's see. So my computer is being kind of slow, but this should work. So I'm going to see it worked. The histogram re-rendered It looks a bit weird sometimes, but that's probably because our data set is shortened right now. So git state git commit -a-m refactor histogram to hooks git push origin hooks refactor, and we can now let's open the histogram bar as well, see if there's anything here we can. Doesn't seem like there's not anything here that we can really turn into a hook, so we're gonna leave it alone, which means the next step is going back to our data handling method or file, removing the shortened stuff and looking at the whole data set and seeing if everything still works. So git commit -a-m useful data set, and let's delete all of our arguments first, reload the whole page, and see what happens. So this part is kind of slow because my computer is slow right now, but when you're trying this out on your own machine, this is going to work a lot faster. And I'm probably just going to cut this whole monologue out of whatever you're seeing in the course. It's being very slow. I think that's because there's over 100,000 data points. Yeah. Wow. Why is it so slow? Maybe we should switch to a new tab. That sometimes helps. Okay, so it's loading the data. Aha. So we've loaded 176,000 visas or data points, and if we click 2016, we should see that everything re-renders and seems to work correctly. It's kind of suspicious that this doesn't jump around as much as it should. But I think everything is still working. We may have been a bit too aggressive with our memoization. Yeah, the filtering isn't working correctly. Or it's hard to say right now because so this worked before, didn't it? Okay, I'm gonna stop live coding now and figure this out and finish the recording afterwards. But thanks everyone for watching. I don't know if you were actually there or not, and my chat room wasn't working, but whether you were there or not, the live coding helped me focus to record this. So thanks a lot, and I will see you tomorrow.